Hi there! In this video series, I would like to share the things that I've learned about Pulp while creating my first Playdate game, Magic Castle. Today, I want to talk about crank-controlled animations. The main idea is that we will import an animation of a tornado, but divide it into separate images, or separate frames of animation if you will. Quickly swapping those frames from the crank will give our eyes the impression of movement. This is the final result. You can move the tornado and control the animation speed by using the crank. There is a link in the description of the video if you want to import this project into the Pulp editor and play around. The movement of the tornado relies heavily on the draw function, and the implementation is just a variation of the smooth player movement hack. I've made 2 videos about those concepts, so I'll not be covering it here, but you can find the links to those videos in the description of this one. Let's talk a bit about the crank. In the player script, you have an event listener on crank. Anytime you use the crank, it will execute the instructions that you've got in that code block. I've used a logic container, so let's head there. Event RA is the amount of change since the last frame of the crank in degrees. It's a relative angle. If I somehow managed to crank this much in one frame, then event RA would be 180. A positive number in the event RA means that I'm cranking forward. Negative means the opposite. We want to keep adding those relative angles and then divide them by some arbitrary number, so they will account to one cycle. I think that having to crank a full 360 degrees to swap just one frame is not great for the player. Through experimentation, I came up with the number 22 to allow for more frame swaps with less cranks. You can play around and see what feels better to you. After the player has continuously cranked enough in one direction, then we reset the amount of cranks we've accumulated so far, and we increment a small variable called animation tornado frame. This code block will make sure that with each cycle we go for the number 0, 1, 2, and 3. Once we reach 3, then in the next cycle we will get 0 and then 1 and so on. Here's the crucial part. In the draw function, I'm using a string with that variable I just mentioned. That means that with each crank cycle, instead of drawing a tile with a name of tornado frame animation tornado frame UL, I'm actually drawing tornado frame 0 UL, and then tornado frame 1 UL, and so on and so on. So putting curly braces or putting a variable in curly braces in a string in the Pulp editor will allow you to access the value of that string. So that's always a good solution for dynamic strings and using them with dynamic values. Tornado 1 UL, Tornado 2 UL, those are exactly the tiles that I've imported. All UL tiles, upper left tiles, have the same name except for the number. The draw function will just swap to a different tile. In the crank logic script, I've added some code to recognize what is the tile under the tornado. You can see it being logged here. This only works if the tornado is spinning. So this could be used if you wanted, for example, to apply damage or a stun effect to an enemy that is currently underneath the tornado. That's all in today's video. See you in the next one.